Richard Waller, Executive Director of the University Museums at the University of Richmond. We are delighted that you have joined us this evening to celebrate the opening of two exhibitions, the 2014 Harnett Biennial of American Prints and Mary Fisher, Messages from My Sketchbook. Both exhibitions are in the Joel and Lila Harnett Museum of Art. Both of the exhibitions we are opening this evening were organized by the University Museums. Let's start with the Harnett Biennial. Our juror for this biennial is the artist Mary Fisher, and I'll say more about her in a moment. We were extremely fortunate to convince her to be the juror for our 11th competitive national exhibition of prints. We received entries from 209 artists from throughout the United States. Our juror needed to look at more than 600 works in making her final choices. From these entries, Mary selected 45 artists from 24 states to be in the exhibition. In her juror statement, Mary Fisher quotes the artist David Smith, who wrote, "Art is made from dreams and visions and things not known, and least of all from things that can be said. It comes from the inside of who you are when you face yourself." In many ways, this was the guiding principle for Mary as she looked through the many prints submitted for her consideration. I know you will enjoy seeing the works that were selected if you didn't get a slight preview before the lecture started, and I am sure you will share her enthusiasm for the artists and prints in the exhibition. I believe that we have several of the artists with us this evening. Would you please stand? I know there are two that stand up. And could we give them a round of applause? They're all over on this side. As we were working together on the Harnett Biennial, Mary and I were also curating an exhibition focused on her work. As I mentioned, her one-person exhibition is titled Mary Fisher, Messages from My Sketchbook. It is my great pleasure to introduce Mary Fisher, who is with us tonight to talk about both the Harnett Biennial and about her own work as an artist. Mary Fisher works in fiber, sculpture, prints, and handmade paper, and she often combines text and media in her works. The exhibition features a selection of works from her most recent series, and they are based on her journal and accompanying sketchbook. The beautiful and complex textile works you will see in the exhibition give you a sense of the artist's intriguing visual exploration that begins in her journal and sketchbook. Mary Fisher attended the Cranbrook Academies, Wayne State University, and the University of Michigan. Her earliest work as an artist was with fiber, including intensive work as a tapestry weaver at Cranbrook. When you see her works in our exhibition, you will see the influences of her early training in textiles and fabric. She was a thriving and successful artist in the 1980s when she was diagnosed HIV positive in the summer of 1991. Within months, she went public with her status and began her journey to becoming one of America's leading AIDS activists and social activists. Mary has survived AIDS and cancer to become an internationally recognized artist, author, advocate, and social entrepreneur. She made history in the summer of 1992 when she addressed the Republican National Convention with a speech about advocacy and compassion in the fight against HIV and AIDS, a speech that moved millions of people around the world at the time, and a speech that has been ranked as one of the best American speeches of the 20th century. In the years since, she has used both art and activism to improve the lives of people living with HIV/AIDS around the world, especially working with women and young girls, promoting prevention, education, and compassion in her international advocacy work. The artist is founder of the Mary Fisher Clinical AIDS Research and Education Fund at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. Mary Fisher is a remarkable and forceful leader in seeking social change, from urging transformation in healthcare to enabling women's empowerment to many other important causes with initiatives in Africa, the United States, and elsewhere. At the same time, she maintains an active and rigorous studio practice as an artist. We feel truly fortunate to have her as our juror for this Harnett Biennial, as an artist showing her work in our museum, and as our speaker this evening. Following Mary's lecture, we will take a few questions, then please join us for the reception and to see both of the exhibitions. The title of her talk this evening is Paging Through My Sketchbook. Please join me in welcoming Mary Fisher.
Thank you, Richard.
You are welcome.
Thank you, Richard, for that, my goodness, overwhelming, generous introduction. My thanks as well to the staff of the University of Richmond Museums who have organized and led the sponsorship of this event, and thank all of you for the kind invitation to serve both as juror for the 2014 biennial and as your lecturer this evening. Each of these is an honor, and I'm humbled by all of them. I would be rude and deeply saddened if I did not immediately single out a great friend of the biennial, a dear friend of mine, and America's premier printmaker, Jim Stroud. If you are in any way unhappy with my work as a juror or a speaker or even a printmaker, you're free to blame Jim Stroud. He's the man who introduced me to this art form almost 30 years ago when we were both still very young. He taught me to see it, touch it, feel it, and create it. But most important is this. He taught me the lesson that he had so obviously mastered. He taught me to love it. If I have never adequately thanked you before, Jim, let me correct that oversight now. From the core of my being, thank you. I also want to acknowledge the hundreds of artists who submitted work for this year's biennial. If my arithmetic is correct, but then Richard said it was over 600, I thought in the end I had juried about 537 pieces, give or take. And from those selected, 45 for the biennial. What I originally feared most was the sheer magnitude of reviewing more than 500 pieces of personally imagined, personally created, personally loved works of art. How could I ever get through more than 500 individual offerings without losing energy and vitality, without being less fair to the last 10 than the first? Because I work in a studio, I could ask advice from colleagues, but the fact remained that all final judgments were mine, all 537 of them. As is so often the case, what I feared proved very different than what I had experienced. I had dreaded the sheer volume, but I had underestimated the personal engagement I would have with each piece, each author. I didn't realize that when looking at photograph, I would begin to wonder about the artist himself, about the creator of this beauty. Is she like me? Does he love what I love? Do we have shared delights and shared depressions? How alike are we? And how does what is now a photograph come from her life, his life, into my life. To jury such works, I learned, is to spend many hours in wonder. Among the notes I offered Richard on my work, and he recorded in the biennials program, and he just told you again, but I'm going to read it again, was this: hardest for me to define, but clearest for me to sense, is the power of honesty that comes through a piece. It's emotionally appealing. It tugs at me. I look away, then come back to look again. And it is what artist David Smith had in mind when he wrote, "Art is made from dreams and visions and things not known, and least of all from things that can be said." It comes from the inside of who you are when you face yourself. In many of the pieces, I was allowed to see the work that carried a truth that could not be said. All 45 chosen finalists, and many others as well, spoke silently of something true, something achingly true. Although it feels a bit like sophomore philosophy, the reality is that all art is about truth. Do we find it in well-choreographed beheadings in the Middle East? Is that truth? Do we find it in the sweet breath of a newborn son? Is that truth? Do we find it in our grandmother's quilt or our ex-lover's email, the pages of Holy Scripture, or the paintings of Van Gogh? The artist is always reaching, groping for the truth. In addition to the wonderful work of artists, you'll find that I have some of my work hanging there as well, here as well. Next to each piece, as is the custom for such exhibits, is a brief artist statement. These are not interpretations. Rather, they are a snippet from my own life, an experience reduced to a paragraph. The experience itself was often a time in which my groping for truth was hard, uncertain, irrational. But the statement itself reports the experience, and the art hanging next to it searches for the meaning, the truth that is somehow embedded in that experience. For example, next to a piece entitled "Love Changes Everything," my mind went back to my experience of 1991. In July of that year, I learned I had been infected with AIDS during my marriage with Brian. Given the state of medicine in 1991, this meant that I was on my way to the grave. My 2 small sons were destined to be orphans. I was going to die. My artist statement says this: "The shadows of 1991 shrouded every moment. I was tragic, depressed, abandoned with HIV, bound for an early death. Don Black's music kept playing through my mind. Love changes everything, how you live and how you die. Grieving, I longed for love. Then early one winter morning, I understood. It's in loving, not in being loved, that we change how we live and how we die. I watched my life take a new direction." Don Black, the composer of so much great music, including the song "Love Changes Everything," is a friend. I know him well, and he was right. The truth is, love does change everything. It is what most we seek and what most we are able to give. Somewhere amid the shock and panic of my diagnosis and the reality of tucking my children into bed lay truth. And the truth was, I loved them. I loved them enough to refuse to leave them without some kind of explanation. I loved them enough to speak out publicly so they would not suffer shame in silence. I loved them enough to stop worrying about myself and start work on changing their world. And that was the truth. In getting out of me, I could love them. If you've already toured my exhibit, you may have heard this all before, because next to the piece entitled "My Art, My Voice" is this paragraph. I was a quiet child when my first father drove away and left us. I was quiet when he never returned. I was a quiet teen when my mother slid into her bottles. I had no language to translate emotion into words, until I learned on an old loom to spin a story of sorrow. And I found in a bright studio that textures and colors could be shaped into joy. The silence of my soul turned into a song. I found my art. I found my voice. That's the truth. My life was mute until my art enabled me to break through the silence. I keep a sketchbook. It has everything in it from original art to a note about a rude taxi driver. It has phone numbers, it has recipes and pencil outlines of a teenager who amused me or a child who died. It isn't quite a journal because it doesn't have enough words. And it isn't a collection of images because it has too many words. It's exactly what we would usually pack into the word sketch. Something done quickly, but with enough clarity to promise more to come. If I were to surround myself with all of the sketchbooks of my adult life and page through all of them with you, here are the kinds of moments that would come off the pages. In 1991, I knew I would die soon and I didn't know how to die. There were bewildering hours, the terror and tears of it all, magnified by a sense of injustice and dread. About the time I thought I understood it, I would look at my 2-year-old playing in the corner, and I was more uncertain than ever. So we'd tear a page from my 1991 sketchbook and hang it somewhere in the studio. I carried a later sketchbook with me to Africa, the home of AIDS, and therefore a place with which I had a blood tie. The pages I'd lift from that sketchbook would have images of the official delegations with which I crisscrossed the continent. We'd find profiles of first ladies and incomplete studies of dying infants. Later, I took my friends, my siblings, and my 2 sons so that they could see what I had seen. Acres of dusty orphans waiting in the searing sun to die. Mothers with infants, both doomed. Families already decimated. Orphans raising orphans. I never really knew how to get it all into a sketchbook. Years later, again in Africa, I sketched women I met in Rwanda who had survived the genocide, but barely. Their children had been slaughtered before them. Their breasts cut off and their eyes gouged out. But they were alive, and they wove baskets, and they sang songs. I sketched them singing and dancing, if you can believe that. So it was in Africa that, for the first time after 1991, I felt welcomed, felt as though I belonged. Does that seem strange for a white woman born to privilege in America? I suppose, but these were also women with AIDS. They too were mothers who feared for their children. They were wives who longed for the loving touch of a husband. Women with whom I could laugh and cry and work and wonder, and late into the night, sing songs of hope and dance to ancient rhythms. I was not different or separate from them. In the smoking, flickering light of an African night, my sketchbook edged from chaos to calm, from grief to grace. The images come to life even today, and they all claim dignity. We might page through recent sketchbooks and land in January 2012, when I was diagnosed with an aggressive cancer that demanded a bilateral mastectomy with no dissection. Here we'd begin exploring the meaning of and the real truth of pain. Pain is a common denominator for all of us. Pain comes in many forms: the agony of cancer or stroke, the brutality of broken promises, broken marriages, broken families. Pain drains our egos, carves away our pride, breaks us open to hear the hungry child weep and her mother grieve. I've sometimes wondered why we need pain. According to Nicholson, pain is God's megaphone to rouse a deaf world. And then he asks, why must it be pain? Why can't God rouse us more gently with violins or laughter? And he answers, because the dream from which we must be wakened is the dream that all is well. But my sketchbook proves that all is not well. The whole world suffers. The poor are hungry, the weak are abused. Bloated politicians fill the air with sound bites, while 1 million orphans waste to dust. The world is not well. Pain reminds us that in a world that is not well, we have work to do. If I opened my current sketchbook to you, you'd see images of women from around the world with whom I've worked in recent months. Young and old, they've gathered with me to create what's called a 100 Good Deeds bracelet. Ask me more about it afterwards, and if you're interested, I certainly will be happy to tell you about it. So it's now 2014, an election year. It's hard to find truth when the airwaves are filled with acrimony and piety of well-heeled candidates, but it might send me back to the sketchbook I was keeping in 1996, also an election year. Together we could find the page from the night I was in Little Rock, Arkansas, speaking at a ceremony recognizing local heroes in the fight against AIDS. The hometown favorite, Bill Clinton, was in a heated presidential race, and among the hundreds of people present, I was probably the only Republican. Everyone was being very discreet until the final award winner took the stage. She was an elderly public health nurse, bright, quick, 77 years old, and feisty. She grabbed the mic and opened with, and I quote, "I've had it with them dumb Republicans. For 15 years, I've talked to them dumb Republicans. Over and over, I've explained there ain't but 3 ways you can get AIDS: swap needles or blood, have sex, or get born with it. And for 15 years, them dumb Republicans kept asking, can't you get it from mosquitoes? I'm telling you all right now that from now on, I'm going to tell them, yep, you can get it from mosquitoes. but only in 3 states, Florida, Louisiana, and Arkansas. Because them's the only states mosquitoes grow so big, them dumb Republicans can have sex with them. The true stories are absolutely the best stories. Most days when I wake up, I feel my age. It's a good thing. I count the years of medications and surgeries. I wonder if I'll always be alone. And then I remember the old prayer. Relieve me of the bondage of self. I think of those I've met whose needs are so much greater and whose resources are so much fewer than mine. It'll be another day of my journey toward self-discovery on the path that leads constantly to giving up on the importance of me. I wander into my studio and start my work. Perhaps I'll open my sketchbook, perhaps not. But my fingers find a piece of fabric and begin to sew. I'll see paint and reach for it. I'll hear a sound that reminds me I do not need to go to Africa. Hungry children are crying here in Richmond, and we could feed them. Abused women down the street, homeless families all around us, elderly men surviving on cat food and beer. They need our care, and we need their affirmation that we are human. And if I am truly ready to search again for what matters, for what's true, for what gives meaning, then I might wander off and receive a child's sloppy kiss in the local foster care center, or feel the old woman's hand clutching mine, wanting me not to go. 22 years ago, I did not expect to be here this evening. I could not have imagined that knowing Jim Stroud would turn me into being a juror, a curator, a lecturer, or most of all, I could not have imagined that I would be an artist. I thought I would be a corpse, an occasional memory. Instead, my sketchbooks are evidence that I've been allowed to find the reason for my being. I've been privileged to serve from Africa to Atlanta, from Rwanda to Rikers Island. I've felt the hands of the dying in hospices and alleyways. Have you had the experience of speaking the truth before you thought it? You say something, and hearing yourself say it, you add, yes, that's right. That's exactly right. That's the truth. It's this experience of spilling out the truth that happens in my work. In the experience of expressing my soul, I discover truth. I look at something I've created almost mindlessly and hear myself say, yes, that's right. That's the truth. If in any of my work you sense an element of forgiveness, it's rooted in this. I lay next to Brian, the man who infected me with AIDS, as he died. In that awful moment, I learned that forgiveness is greater than anger. I did not hear my earlier cries of distress, my panic, or my fury. What I heard instead was my own voice saying softly, "It's okay, Brian, you can go." And his voice answering even more softly, "I love you." You need not go to a studio to be an artist, nor to Zambia to find truth. Go to those who need and love you here, now, They are the sketchbooks of our lives, writ in human experience, outlined in hope and in love. And if you can listen closely to the truth as it's spoken by them, you will also hear somewhere in the background an ancient voice whispering, "Grace to you and peace." Thank you. I don't know. I'm told that I have this thing on my head so that I can walk around, but that I would, that people might want to ask questions. And I'm willing to answer. I do answer anything. I'm brutally honest, and it's like really, it gets me in trouble, but I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any. Congratulations to, I only saw one of you stand, but there's somebody else here too. To the artists here. It's a remarkable show. Isn't it a remarkable show? I was kind of proud of it. Hard to do on slides, on a computer, but I got to tell you, I was just totally humbled by the work. And the artist's statements meant so much to me. I felt like we were all in the same studio together. Wouldn't that have been fun? I wanted to know how you did that. Oh boy, there were times when I just wanted to pick a piece and say, oh, can I call this person and just find out how they did that? You know, because you just want to try it. Anyway, any questions I would be happy to answer. Yes, ma'am.
Well, you invited the question about the Good Deeds bracelet, so I'd love to hear about that.
Great. I'm happy. So a year ago, just about a year ago, I met a man who was a filmmaker, and he told me, he was doing this movie about the CNN Hero of the Year, and I wanted to bring it to Sedona. That's where I live, and that's where my studio is. And we talked and had lunch and had dinner and talked, and he told me about this game that he played with his children. He said that he tells his children they have to do 100 good deeds in a year. And that there are 2 rules to this game. You have to go out of your way to do the good deed, and you can't tell anyone. I thought, that's really cool. This is great. Then he said, my daughter Kylie, she was 13 at the time, she puts beads on her left shoe, and then every time she does 10 good deeds, she moves a bead to her right tennis shoe. And he said beads, and I said, whoa. I teach women how to crochet, bead crochet in Africa, things like this, and beads. Okay, let me think. I want to make a bracelet. How do you feel about that? And he said, whatever, I'm making films. You do whatever you want. You can have it. And so proceeded to go and find a system that would be simpler and not too expensive to do so that people could afford it. And now we're in 8 locations around the world. I say 8 because we're also in New York, a tiny little group in New York that's really pushing, but we're trying and we're working with them. We want to be in the United States too, but we're in 4 countries in Africa, Haiti, and we just got back from Bali and India. So here's the deal. The women we teach make this bracelet. Here's the cord. They make the cord, they put the bracelet together, and they get paid for every bracelet they make. And then they send it back to us. We sell it on our website, and it's all very nonprofit, so the only people making money are those women. And then you have an opportunity to do 100 good deeds. And every time you do a good deed, you take this little rubber ring and you move it over one. And that's it. And that's all it is. You wrap it around your wrist 3 times, and it reminds you to think differently, maybe. So it's not about always the big things that people do. like Bill Gates and people like that. But it's about the small things we can do in our own communities and our schools, churches, and everything. It's about teaching our children about the small things that really make a difference to the person sitting next to you. I was on an airplane. Where was I? Oh, well, I've been on a lot of planes. Let's see. It was the one going from Phoenix to New York the other day. And there was this woman who was definitely having trouble, and this other young woman said, "Let me help you." And I mean, literally picked her up and put her in the seat and put her luggage away. And I was astounded. I was watching her. I went, when I get my bag down, I'm going to give you a bracelet. She was just doing such a good deed out of just because. And I thought, that's what it's all about. So that's what this is about. It's called, on the website is 100gooddeeds.org. And you can follow us. We have all of those things that everybody knows about except me, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And I'm not very good at those things, but there are a lot of people that are. So follow us and tell us your story. We do tell good deeds, but anonymously, since you're not supposed to tell anyone. So it's been really amazing. My first goal was 10,000 bracelets, because in my mind, 10,000 was 1 million good deeds in the world. 10,000 bracelets equals 1 million. And we're already up to what? We just passed 16,000. So we only launched in March. So it's really been pretty good, exciting. And going to these countries and teaching these women and empowering them, most of them HIV positive, not all of them, but they're all vulnerable. Watching them get a sense of self-esteem and the ability to be creative and to bring themselves up out of a place that they don't want to be. It's exciting. What? Oh, hi. Hi.
What would you want? 1, 2, 3 things for anyone to go through your exhibition. What would you want them to take home with them after experiencing it?
What would I want you all to take home? 3 things. Well, I might want you to read the artist statements and really become a part of my story. That would be one thing. 2 would be just enjoy the collage of my work as a whole and in each piece, because some of the prints are really fun, and I hope that you enjoy it. And I think the 3rd thing would be that you would go away knowing that your art can express your soul and that it's okay to do that. I use words in my art because that is part of me, and I give speeches, so it is part of what I do. So I think being able to take what you experience and be really truthful about it and honest about it is an okay thing to do. And not everybody's going to love it, and just be out there. That's what I think. Yes, ma'am.
Are your children artists also?
My children are what?
Are they artists?
Oh, well, my one son is a filmmaker, but he's in the early stages of filmmaking. He wants to do his documentary on AIDS. And I told him, he wanted to do it on me, and I said, I'm old, and it's like an old story, so now, you know what, Max, you have to do it on you. It's about you and your story, which is true because he grew up with this. So yes, I guess that's artistic, and he's fighting his way through that realm. And my other son is a writer, amazing writer, actually. Not published yet or anywhere close to it, but that's what he loves to do, so we'll see. And Max, when I knew that Max was negative, when they were little, Zach is adopted, so I knew he was fine. When Max was negative is when I could just then deal with what I had to deal with. So both of them have grown up in a world where they lost their father and, a world of AIDS and a world of their mom being up and down with health and trying to be an artist and not being well and all of that. So they have, I have to give them a lot of credit for just growing up with me. But they're great kids and they've got great hearts. So maybe you'll join us at the reception. Come have something to drink and take a look at the show. Yes, Richard?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.